There's not going to be one capital allocation mechanism that works for everything. We're more inventing like a toolbox. Just like when you want to fix a problem in your house, you don't say like,
Oh, I'm a screwdriver maxi. I have to use this one tool.
you say,
No, I'm going to use like pliers or screwdrivers or a saw, depending on what my problems are. And I think that like there's going to be like a dozen.
Yeah, I don't think we're converging anytime soon or maybe ever towards best solutions.
it's kind of like trying to engineer a thing that I wished existed when I was starting Gitcoin and I was just stumbling around in the dark alone, like building crowdfunding tech.
Yeah, I think the biggest learning I've had, especially from building Dorg over the years, was starting. And there's this like urge amongst, mechanism nerds to fix all the world's problems. There has to be one core interesting thing to set something apart and make it, succeed. But there shouldn't be multiple really interesting things. And this is another problem, is like projects that try to innovate on like multiple different vectors at once.
I think that that's a great point. Innovating where your core strength is, and hopefully that's a high leverage point that the market cares about. What I'm trying to do with allo.capital is create a Schelling point or like an attractor for the best builders. And I think that like my ideal case is that if you're a builder that's building one of these systems, we can accelerate you with intelligence, distribution for your mechanism, capital, and like networking with the other people that are in the scene. And so I think that we're creating like an attractor at like the economic and social and technological level that allows people to just move faster by virtue of being a member of the network. And welcome to the allo.capital podcast, powered by the Green Pill Network. If you're just joining us this season, we are summoning allo.capital, a new spin out from Gitcoin that is designed to build the capital allocation layer of the tokenized internet. I think there's big upside here. Capital allocation is a multi-trillion-dollar design space, and VCs, governments, NGOs, and DAOs all have to allocate capital to survive and thrive. But it's also a place where we can start small. Every time you spend money, you are allocating capital. We are threading a through line, partnering with builders, researchers, and funders to figure out what on-chain capital allocation will look like, building it on-chain, and then iterating from there. If you want to learn more, you can visit our website at allo.capital, where you can download the Allo Books for free, play with some of our dApps, join the Telegram, or participate in the DAO. All right, my guest today is Ori Shimony. Ori leads the Mechanism Institute, which is a research hub advancing on-chain mechanisms to improve human institutions. He is also a research fellow at the Ethereum Foundation, exploring underexplored on-chain use cases. Previously, he co-founded Dorg, the first service DAO, and legally wrapped DAO, and co-authored the DAO model law, which is now enacted in multiple jurisdictions. I've been an admirer of Ori from afar for many years. I think that the Mechanism Institute is a really great mapping of all of the different capital allocation or governance mechanisms that are possible on chain. And so it's been a real delight to get to know Ori over the last quarter or two and explore the synergies between on-chain capital allocation, my work, and his work at Mechanism Institute. And I think that we're kind of independently converging on some similar ideas, which is always fun when that happens. And so in this episode, we kind of play jazz on top of his work on the Mechanism Institute, and then inject a little bit of Allo Capital, and then swirl it around. And I think it's a really fun conversation to listen to if you're a impact nerd or a mechanism nerd or someone who just wants to understand where this space is going. So without further ado, I think you are going to enjoy this episode with Ori. Hey, Ori, how's it going?
Going well. How about you?
Pretty good. Glad to have you here. I think that we've been discussing mechanisms over the last couple months together, and excited to foreground that discussion in front of people who've been following Allo Capital. So why don't you tee us off with an introduction of yourself, and then also would love to hear about Mechanism Institute.
Sure. So I've been researching on-chain mechanisms as long as I've been working. I got started trying to build DAOs on Bitcoin in 2015. And then shortly after Ethereum launched, I got into Solidity, realized it was a far more efficient way to build unstoppable systems than building different networks on top of Bitcoin, and quickly got into the DAO space and basically worked on DAOs for several years. I started Dorg in 2018 with some other developers. So we were this on-chain services DAO, still runs today. And through that process, I also had to figure out a lot of the non-technical sides of having mechanisms interface with the real world. And so we actually were the first in the US to legally incorporate our DAO. So we worked with lawyers to like figure out how to do that. And then various other things over the years of tracking reputation, incentivizing good quality work, sales, recruitment, marketing, all the kind of different things that go into running an organization and trying to do as much as possible on chain transparently. And so, yeah, in that process, I learned a lot about legal sides of crypto and participated in some efforts to make DAOs more legible to the legal system. And fast forward to today, I'm now generally focused on mechanisms, not just DAOs. I've also worked on public goods funding mechanisms like DAO Drops, and now I'm hanging out with the Allo crew and working on different allocation mechanisms. And basically, this culminated in me creating this library of on-chain primitives that help to kind of conceptualize the full design space. So that's what the Mechanism Institute is all about, is helping people understand this wide design space of on-chain mechanisms, understanding that they can help with a variety of things. They can help with allocation, with governance, with rewards and penalties. And at the same time, I'm also a research fellow at the Ethereum Foundation, where I'm helping explore kind of the under attended to use cases that Ethereum can enable in the long term beyond the kind of current focus of the ecosystem on these like highly financial games.
Yeah, I remember two areas where I think things overlap for us, and that I'm just excited to talk about is when I found out about DAO Drops, which was Diorg's, I think, retroactive funding round. I was just really exciting, and I think I did an episode with Magenta and someone else from Diorg that I
And
can't
me.
remember. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yep.
And just really great to see the plurality of providers of retro funding. And then also, I've got mechanism.institute, your website up, and it's just a beautifully well curated registry of all the different mechanisms out there. And wondering if you want to tell us about either of those experiments.
DAO Drops was definitely a fun experiment. That was when retroactive funding became a topic with Optimism's round one, I think around 2022. And then shortly after, we did DAO Drops, which tried to make it like stupid simple for people to nominate one another and then be eligible for funding, because a big, complaint with public goods is the kind of administrative steps to apply. So we made some clever kind of like design tweaks there. And yeah, with Mechanism Institute, it kind of got started at Zuzalu 2023, where I was presenting and running workshops on mechanisms and just realized that people all had a different, let's say, siloed understanding of mechanisms. You have like the governance nerds, you have like the public goods nerds, you have the DeFi heads, you have all these different, groups. And obviously they all see smart contracts as this powerful tool for unbreakable agreements that can compose with one another, that are transparently executing. But I realized there wasn't like a really robust mapping of the design space. And so it started with an Airtable database that I, made public, and then gradually we made improvements over time as people really found it useful and would ask more questions. Um, we basically improved the ontology, the taxonomy of mechanisms, added more descriptions to each of them, examples, and then also have done other kind of like research efforts with other orgs like Gitcoin and like the Zuzalu hackathons that we participated in over the years. Basically to bring the whole mechanism, the on-chain mechanism space into one unified kind of ontology. And so we can get more into that as we go. But I think basically the exciting part for me is that on-chain mechanisms are a new design space that is powerful. And we've only started to like shine the flashlight around in the dark cave and started to like understand little bits and pieces, but we don't have like a systematic understanding in the same way that maybe architects do, right? Architecture has hundreds, if not thousands of years of practice behind it, and principles and schools of thought, textbooks. We're not really there yet with the digital realm of designing digital structures. Only recently do we get this superpower of immutability that actually lets us build digital spaces, digital structures that have longevity, that don't just turn off the moment a company goes out of business. This is quite new.
Well, I'm wondering if we could talk about the why before we talk more about the mechanisms themselves. So like, why does this space animate you so much? Why does it give you so much energy? How come it seems like it feels alive for you? Could you
Mm.
say why it feels so important?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I always had a frustration with the templates that were handed down to us of how we could do things. Here's here's a university, here's a labor union, here's a political party, here's a corporation, here's a nonprofit. We have these kind of rigid templates for coordinating activity, and they're pretty good for the most part, but they also have these like huge failure modes and high friction and high bureaucracy needed to make them work. And ultimately, a lot of them rely on the state. They're very like embedded into the legal kind of ontology. They're embedded into the enforcement of the state at the end of the day to enforce the contracts that underpin those agreements. And why I get animated about on-chain mechanisms is because they blast open that design space. So instead of having like a dozen or so very popular templates, we now have full programmability. So we can coordinate for different kinds of things that have fallen through the cracks of those templates, of which I don't have to go through the list. We all know there's many problems in our world, many market failures, many governance failures. And so I think the exciting part about on-chain mechanisms it just kind of opens the Pandora's box to get creative about how to structure the way that we execute different kinds of agreements together. And we can do so without the heavy, bureaucratic, expensive kind of state edifice as the enforcement mechanism. Instead, we have the lighter weight consensus engine of blockchains.
I remember saying in the Allo books when I first wrote them last year that the old ways of allocating capital are inefficient, bloated with administrative overhead, and not democratized. And now, because we have global, transparent, incorruptible, programmable money, we can program our values into our money. We can build networks that are more democratic, efficient, effective at allocating capital. And I'm definitely feeling like like we're grasping the same elephant in how we're deciding or how we're describing this design space. It feels like the opportunity to fund public goods without the state in the most reductionist form, like it's just a really big design space because trillions of dollars go through the state and there are trillions of dollars worth of public goods and it's not really being effectively spent. So that's what animates me about this design space, and it's cool that multiple people have sort of like independently discovered the power of this, and now it feels like there's a groundswell of enthusiasm. I mean, maybe I'm just hanging out with mechanism nerds, but yeah, do you want to riff on that at all?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I think it kind of dovetails nicely with what's going on in the non-crypto world. You have like Doge and a lot of excitement around cutting government waste and a lot of controversy, let's say, excitement and fear, uncertainty, doubt. And so, but I think that generally there's this recognition that the way that things have been done just don't make sense anymore, or they've gotten bloated and corrupted beyond repair. And so I think it's great that there's efforts to reform from the inside how those things work. But yeah, then there's those of us that realize that you can actually just think in terms of build it entirely anew and then run experiments, have it be voluntaristic. And over time, that can spread and have a network effect and then eat the cake of the current incumbent kind of structure for public goods funding and other kinds of coordination, governance, fundraising, etc.
Yeah, it feels like we're building a parallel society upon which some of the load that's been borne by the state over the last couple years, well, couple centuries could be transferred over. And I think that one way that I sort of frame it is like a fourth turning thing, like the institutions that were built 4 generations ago around World War II are starting to collapse or atrophy. And now we have the internet age. So we're moving from the industrial age to the internet age. But I also have a lot of trepidation when I think about this, because when I think about how existential the systems that we take for granted on are like air traffic control, like I don't know that Web3 systems are ready for controlling our nuclear devices and like
Hmm.
I think that it's a little bit of a LARP right now to say that we're building a parallel
Oh yeah.
society that can replace existing institutions, and we only are starting to like lay down the scaffolding for how some of most basic systems could be moved over. not even starting to even think about the most existential systems that we've probably all taken for granted. So, what's your response to that? If you're enjoying this episode, please check out the remainder of the episode on the feed hosted at allo.capital. You must be a allo.capital patron NFT holder to hear the rest of the episode. Allo.capital patron NFTs give you access to the allominati, which is a private community that has access to the Allo DAO's evolution, novel capital allocation, intelligence, and research like this episode, like this podcast, and also research reports that we are publishing at allo.capital, and early access to builds and other innovations in the Allo community. Thanks for listening. If you want to hear the rest of the episode, check it out at allo.capital. Peace and love.